And good evening. Welcome to Better Together, sharing our lupus stories. I'm Chanel Gabriel, and we are all the way live, and we're talking about lupus. Please welcome to the virtual stage my co host, the wonderful Dr. Michaela Baird, also known as the Lupus Doc. We call her that because Dr. Michaela specializes in lupus, but she's also a double certified physician in internal medicine and rheumatology. Yay! We're happy to have you here. Um,
Hi,
joining us.
Chanel. Thank you so much for having me tonight. Um, I'm just excited to be here again, and we are talking about managing your work, managing your career, while also managing your lupus. So, for someone who has lupus, I think that when I talk to a lot of patients, managing your workplace and a career can be a big conversation and a challenge. And I think that lupus can sometimes be misunderstood. We definitely know it's misdiagnosed, there's unpredictable symptoms, and there's a lot of room for minimization and misjudging by coworkers who don't really understand where you're coming from and what you're coping with. This is, what I hear from people I work with who have lupus all the time.
So, I mean, what do you tell them, about how to manage work? Is there anything any words of wisdom you impart upon them?
I think it's about figuring out who your support people are and who the people are who can support you in the workplace. And also, we're going to talk about that tonight, but putting in those important pieces that are also going to help you when you're sick. Do you have sick time to do that? Do you have the ability to work remote? All of these things that can be put in place to really make sure you can perform optimally.
No, I think that's the important part. That support side of it is a thing that we don't always think about. And I can't wait for us to talk about this. But, it's interesting. The other day I read that 1 in 4 adults have two or more chronic illnesses or chronic conditions. So even though I know we're talking about lupus, throw your L's up all day, but chances are at work, somebody is dealing with something. Like everybody is dealing with something.
You're so right, Chanel. Working career is a topic that is relevant to everyone because as we think more about disability and people's different struggles, everyone may be coming to the table with something. And so when we think about this, and especially think about COVID and how we survived that time period and how that's changing the workspace, this is something everyone really has to have a conversation about. And I think, as a physician, it's something that I see impact people even more. And I think that I've been thinking about how do these changes happen, maybe even more than other people.
I mean, I think for me, as a person living with lupus, I know that one of the things that I think about, and maybe this will come up later as we talk more about it, but my health insurance. Does my new job take my health insurance that my doctor takes? And sometimes there's some doctors we care about more than others. My rheumatologist, I'm like, I don't care what my PCP is. My rheumatologist needs to stay my rheumatologist. So
Right.
sometimes when I'm working, that's something that I'm always like, I try to think about. Even if there are options, some places you work in might have options and selections that you can choose from. But also, yeah, what's the policy around like time off? There's some jobs that we do have that are not understanding, like they're very high risk and you have to be there. And what does the time off situation look like? If I need to leave early, is that something that's good that I have to fight somebody for? So those are the things that I think about when I think about workplace issues. But you know what? Enough about me. We're going to get straight into this amazing powerhouse trio of folk that we have here in this building. And these ladies are going to share their stories and their work life wisdom. And we want to hear from you, audience. If you are in the virtual building, please share us your comments, your questions. Use that chat and let us know you're here because we'll definitely try to get to them. And also connect with each other. Join us live in this conversation. So
Yeah.
we're all
And one
together.
quick shout out, just that it is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So we wanted to shout that out and say we're thinking of everyone who is dealing with this and touched or affected by breast cancer.
Yes, we got to say some prayers for the warriors who are no longer with us. and whose memory lives on through us. Shout out to all of the survivors. Let's take a quick pause for that. All right. On to the show as we remember all these warriors and we continue to fight and we continue to be warriors. First up, we're going to meet one lupus warrior and advocate, Danielle Corrady. She is the chief of staff for the United States Department of Homeland Security. And when I read that, I definitely thought about Olivia Pope. Okay. It just sounds like a job. I'm thinking like, Fitz, I'm taking care of it, like. But jokes aside, that is a pretty awesome job. And Danielle is also a member of the Iota Gamma Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. Hello, soror. And if you don't know, our Vice President Kamala Harris is our sorority sister. So now we have a reason to show my soror's picture on Better Together. I'm very excited. Thank you, Sora. Now, Danielle is also a member of the Southern Maryland Chain chapter of the Links, which is another amazing organization that serves the community. And she's also she got all these memberships. She is a member of the Southern Maryland chapter of the Top Ladies of Distinction. Okay. I don't know what her spare time looked like, but she is doing a lot of great things. Also while working on her doctorate in business administration.
Wow.
I mean, Danielle's a working woman. Okay. She be working.
Busy lady.
Busy lady. But next we're going to meet lupus advocate Trisha Santos. Trisha has spent more than 25 years working in financial services. She has held positions in compliance, data center operations, and executive support. And she currently works in client services. She says that her 25 years with the same Cape Cod firm, she has never shared her lupus diagnosis with her colleagues or managers. So revealing our condition, I know, is a very sensitive issue within the lupus community. And we're going to talk about that tonight. Do we share everything? It's going to be a great conversation. Trisha is an active member of the Lupus Foundation New England chapter, and she's even lobbied for lupus on Capitol Hill. And in November, Trisha will be attending the ACR, American College of Rheumatology's annual conference. I'm saying, where's my invitation? But she is an invited and sponsored patient advocate. That is a big deal. She's holding it down and representing for us on them stages. So Dr. Michaela, you're a member of the American College of Rheumatology. Are you going?
I'm not going this year, but this is my professional association. I sit on the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee. It does amazing work. So I'm so excited for her to be joining.
Yes, congrats, Trisha. And last but not least, I told you we have an amazing guest here. We were going to chat with human resources management guru, Sanat Walker. Sanat is HR and DEI, or Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion consultant, and a DEIB advocate. The B stands for belonging, just so you know, okay? She is a Society of Human Resource Management certified professional. That's what the letters SHRM-CP mean. That's after her name. Get all the titles and letters correct, right? She holds a master's degree in HR management from the Catholic University, one of America's top colleges. Sanat is inclusive workplace solutions specialist and a career coach. And she's also a credentialed career strategist at the careerhelpdesk.com. Sanat in 2013 founded HR Girlfriends, it's trademark, a human resources global networking organization for women. And as president of HR Girlfriends, Sanat leads her team of human resource girlfriends to consult, train, educate, develop, share, promote, and advocate for solutions in the field of human resource management. Our guests are amazing. They are killing it and they're doing so much. And we are so excited. And we have an amazing audience. Thank you for taking the time to join us tonight. Okay. So let's get going. All right, we're going to start. First, we're going to talk with, joining us from Maryland, Department of Homeland Security Chief of Staff and Lupus Advocate. Bring in to the virtual stage, Danielle.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome, Danielle. We just want to talk to you about work life, but first we have to hear your lupus story because we do that with all our guests.
Okay. So, as said, Danielle Karate. I have lived in Maryland for a little over 15 years. The first summer that I moved here, I started feeling off and didn't know what was going on. And within 6 months, I was diagnosed with lupus, and that was in 2006. And so I have been on that journey since. I've spoken before about my journey and told people, I'm extremes of lupus. It's either all good or all bad. I don't have an in between. And so I have had years of very little symptoms. And then I've had, times when all hands on deck to figure out what's going on with me. Um, so I have come through lupus nephritis, heart failure, and most recently, I was able to bring in the new year, getting diagnosed with Graves' disease. So I spent New Year's Eve in the hospital and was subsequently diagnosed with Graves' disease. So I am always between rheumatology, nephrology, and endocrinology, trying to keep things balanced for myself.
Wow. So you are definitely juggling a lot of titles as well as a
Yeah.
lot of illnesses. And we talked about that, most adults having about two or more, but definitely I know that that's a challenge. But your responsibility as chief of staff is managing, while you're managing yourself, you're also managing the staff.
And
And
it's been challenging. And just for clarification, I'm the chief of staff for one of the executives within Homeland Security, not the entire agency. So
so you're not Olivia Pope
no,
with
I'm not Olivia Pope
E613.
out there.
Well, no, that's important to know too. I mean, and thank you for clarifying. And I mean, but you're still like managing a staff. Like, how do
Yes.
you, like, as someone living with a chronic illness, have you had to manage employees that had a chronic illness, and what was that like? You're an employee and a boss.
Right. I have managed employees with chronic illnesses, including autoimmune diseases, cancer, all types of illnesses. And typically, my management style is I'm very intentional in how I manage and build relationships with my employees. And so I try to create a safe environment where my employees feel comfortable sharing, information with me so that they're not afraid to share that things are going on in their life that's impacting their ability to be successful at work. And so we figure out the best approach that's going to work for them. And sometimes that means they have to take time off work. Sometimes that means they have to work from home. It just varies depending on the employee's needs.
Mhm. And I mean, and you're, like I said, you're an employee and a boss.
Mhm.
I'm curious, can you give some advice on both? Like, what advice would you give an employee around working with a chronic illness? And what advice would you give somebody that might be a new boss
Yeah.
thinking about that as well?
As an employee, you have to figure out what you're comfortable sharing, because not every employer is receptive to an employee with a chronic illness because it automatically goes to the worst scenario that can happen. And that's not always the case. I mean, for me, I can go years without any issues and then, boom, I have a year where it's nonstop. And then I can go another 5 years with nothing at all. So, it varies. Um, as a boss, I really try to create that safe space, and if they're not safe with me, I would advise them to find someone to be safe with because um, sometimes the illness can be scary and things happen and you can fall ill at work. Somebody needs to know what's going on with you so that we know how to react to take care of you in the event something happens.
What do you think is, thank you, Danielle, the biggest change in the workplace that you've noticed over, especially through your time doing work?
Um, First, I have to say I've been very fortunate with supervisors. And as a federal employee, I've had access to a lot of resources. And so I've not come across a supervisor who has given me any issues with managing my illness and doing my work. So, I know that's not everyone's story, but I do know that I've been fortunate. Um, so, you just really have to, again, I say be honest with people and share with them and, find a safe space.
No, that's important.
I wanted to, touch on what you said about feeling um, able to share with your employer, because I think this comes up a lot, and people really have trouble navigating what they can share and what they should share, what
Mhm.
they think their employer expects them to share. And you talked about a safe space, so tell me more about
Yeah,
that.
I don't think you have to share the intricate details of your disease management, and what your doctor, specifically is, all the minute details, but it is important, to share it, and you have to judge the level of safety with your supervisor, with your agency, with your organization, because I know not all are going to be welcoming of an employee identifying with, a chronic illness. But, you know, you have to figure out a way to share some piece of information that you're comfortable with. Again, I always am concerned about people falling ill in the workplace. And, I don't want people to put themselves in the position of being terminated or fired because they're sharing. So you have to know your organization and your supervisor to know what you can safely share.
I mean, but I think that there's something to be said about, you know, is there an example of that, that you went through where people didn't know,
Yeah,
and
I did.
please
I was
share. 'Cause
yeah, I was away
that's
from
usually the
my
hard part is like, what happens if you don't
if you
share?
don't. I was at an organization temporarily. I was away from my home agency, and, I had been there a couple months and, friendly with people, but my home office knew what was going on with me, and I did not share that with the new people that I work with. I didn't have that level of comfortability with them, and one day I was sitting at my desk, and I was feeling so bad, and I called my nurse, said, "Hey, I'm feeling bad." We started playing phone tag, and I tell you, but God, I had a voice in my head say, "Get up and go now." I got up, packed my bag, told them I'm leaving, got on the metro, got to my car, and the nurse called and she says, "You need to get to the emergency room now."
Mm.
Obviously, at that point, I had nobody to drive me because I'm making my way on my own. And I get to the emergency room and I am admitted in the cardiac ICU for heart failure.
Wow.
I could have had a heart attack on the metro. No one would have known what was going on. The people that I worked with had no clue what was going on, and that could have turned into a very dangerous situation.
So yeah, so there's a benefit, and more than just like, oh, everyone, I can take days off. There's also this idea that if something severe happens, people
Right.
do know, at least have an idea of what could be the source or that there's something else wrong. Especially because lupus, we look amazing. That's something we always talk about. It's not an illness that always manifests itself physically. So,
And I always get that. My doctors, if I get a new rheumatologist, which happens a lot in the military healthcare system, they'll walk in and I kind of get that look, hmm, and they'll say, this isn't what I was expecting. You don't look like what I expected because I have this record that's, this big with all of these things that have happened and they see me and the inside and outside don't match.
and I mean, Sora, you look fabulous. Did you do the pearls on
Thanks,
purpose?
Aurora.
I saw that and I was like, oh, my Sora's there. Okay. I mean, that's the one thing about lupus. It's a gift and a curse because people
Yeah.
don't always know how severe it is. And I feel like that's something I think we're going to talk a little bit further with one of our later guests a little bit about that. But, that's so important. So we're going to, I think that there's one other thing. I mean, have you had any experience with any of these different programs that are built to protect people like the Family Medical Leave
Absolutely.
Act and
Yeah.
the Reasonable Accommodations Program? Can you
I've
talk a
used
little bit about what those were and how those helped you?
I have used reasonable accommodations in my workplace before, which adjusted my schedule to provide me with additional telework days. I recently utilized FMLA. I needed to take some time away from work to um, release stress and focus on my health and focus on my mental, spiritual, physical well being. And my doctors were very supportive of that. And so I took that time off and it was much needed. and I was able to come back to work, although I'm fully teleworking because of some of the immunosuppressive medications that I'm now on. I'm teleworking, but I'm able to re-engage in work and feeling much better.
Hmm. Thank you. Thank you. And it's funny enough, I'm in the same space where I just stepped away from my job and I'm like, oh, let me recenter myself. And I think we don't think about doing that too much. But you're doing so much. You're about a part of like almost every Black auxiliary group that known a man. And you're studying for your doctorate and you're managing with 2 kids and grown or not, you got kids, and you're balancing it all. And you are such an inspiration.
Thank you.
But we're going to bring in Danielle into this conversation. I think thank you so much for everything. I know that we have so many Lupus Warriors in the building, but Danielle is joining us now. She is a lupus activist. I'm sorry. Thank you, Danielle. Trisha, I'm bugging. Oh my gosh. Bring in Trisha Santos. Trisha, welcome to the virtual stage to join us on this conversation. Hello, Trisha.
Hi, Chanel. Hi, Dr. Michaela. How are you?
Hi.
So glad to have you. And Trisha, you've been managing lupus for over 35 years.
That's
Very
right.
few times am I in a room where somebody actually has me on time. I have 20 years under my belt. I'm going to get to 35. You are truly a warrior. Now you have to tell us your lupus story.
Thank you. So I was diagnosed in my last and final year in college, and it wasn't a question in anyone's mind. I went to 3 board certified rheumatologists, and the diagnosis came a lot more quickly than I'd say today when we hear about an average diagnosis time of 6 years. Very fortunate for that. The case that I had in my 20s looks so much more different than the case that I have now. And that was probably, I would say that's probably one of the biggest surprises, right? I have a dual diagnosis with psoriasis. And I find that when my skin flares up, I'm more likely to have a case of episcleritis. So that we're going to see the inflammation in the eyes. So, really very different. It sort of matured with me, if you will. But 35 years has been a long time in some respects. And then in others, there were so many good years in between. So I'm really, I'm excited to talk a little bit more about it.
I mean, as a practicing rheumatologist, I want to hear from your side and your perspective how the landscape of medicine and treatment has changed, because you've seen so much happen over 35 years.
Right. So, it felt, very dormant, very quiet for many, many years. I think we'll all say that. In the beginning, it was, just a couple of items that we could look for help. The advent of biologics and things that we're getting some relief from. It's amazing. It's amazing. We were sort of told in that day to sort of go home, get some rest. You were also given a life expectancy. And I, that isn't part of the conversation anymore, thankfully. And we're really, that I'm so grateful for.
So now we're talking about, how we cope being in the working space, and how has your job changed, or how have you seen work change?
So I have to say, I work in financial services in the Boston area, and I've spent 25 years at the same company. So I've seen, global human resources sort of change a bit. I've also seen, more benefits come online. We have an internal affinity group for the Disabilities Awareness Alliance, which I make a real effort to be a part of and enjoy. I have just never felt comfortable sharing my diagnosis. Now, I should tell you that I worked in an operations position in data center operations, and it was a 12-hour shift. So nobody wanted to hear anybody was tired. Anybody was, you're on, you're monitoring. People's retirement is flowing through the systems. There's no talk of, well, I have a little bit of a cold today, or and I think that sort of shaped me. to why maybe I was very reluctant to share the diagnosis. And in sharing a diagnosis over the years, I've learned people know bits and pieces of lupus, but nobody knows the full story. So that's really been a challenge as well.
No, I definitely understand that. I mean, you know, you say lupus, everybody operates on who they might have known that had lupus. And I feel like most times you're like, somebody I know passed from it. So, you know, it's like if you're operating only from this limited knowledge, do I really want you to know the full story? And so I can understand that. And even now you still like no one you work with knows.
No, no, I just don't feel comfortable with it. A couple of things, and I know we're going to kind of talk a little bit more in the HR field. Um, we do have some, you know, insurance policies that, you know, for employees, which means that pre-existing conditions, you would be disqualified from receiving some benefits. And so I feel like it should be something I sort of keep to myself, and we'll take it from there. You know what my needs are as a patient and as an employee.
No, definitely, definitely. I mean, of course, this is, I mean, no one has an obligation. You know, this is also a very personal thing. And so
Mhm.
we'd never, ever want anyone to feel like they have to. I think the one thing, and I argue with people all the time when people talk, you know, love the man or hate the man. That was the one thing that Obama did in the time that he was there was that pre-existing condition for insurance. Because I remember not being able to get insurance, starting a new full-time job, super excited out of college. And they're like, we'll take care of everything but your lupus. And so, you know, I mean, I know that the provisions are different in different places, but at least just to throw that out there to those out there that know that like your insurance company can't discriminate and not take you because you had a chronic illness. Just to throw that out there for all our listeners to make sure we clarify, but also knowing that every company has their own policies and protocols around managing that. And we're going to talk a little bit with our one of our guests about some of those things that you can make sure you yell at the HR department for. But and I mean, I'm just curious, are there any career goals that impacted your lupus impacted, you know, just in general moving forward? You know, I know that you've been in these really high stakes jobs or roles that were really important. You know, how has it impacted?
So it really, I went into a very long flare when I supported the head of global technology, and to keep pace with that was incredible because it is a global company. It is operating around the world on the 24/7 schedule. So I was really taxed by that. Devices ringing, you know, um, it was so challenging. So it did affect my daily life in the office, and being around you know, this high level of management. And I found that when I could step away, that collective breath that you take was really needed, particularly with lupus. It wasn't, you know, I needed that extra time to unwind and to get your mind off of work was huge. So taking and making some changes every couple of years, every 3-4 years, and learning a new skill in a new position in a new group has been tremendous for me in terms of keeping my career fresh and you know, trying to stay healthy. Definitely.
Thank you, Trisha. Do you feel like these symptoms, I mean, I'm sure they have impacted your performance, and have you had any breakthroughs on how to manage that?
Um, you know, I work so closely with, as most of us do, with rheumatology and dermatology. So some of the things that we had to look at in the office was photosensitivity. And I should tell you that my lights are on, so you're getting a clear view of what lighting does to somebody who it got dark here on the East Coast all of a sudden. So photosensitivity had to be managed on the job. And that was a real tough one to have to go and say, you know, this is covered by the Americans with Disabilities Act. Those kinds of step forwards weren't easy, but they needed to be done, and they certainly did make the lighting accommodation for me. Um, these are just such important conversations that we've had to have on the job.
Are there other accommodations that you've been able to benefit from? Like, do you work from home at all, or are you always in the office?
I do. So obviously everyone went home during the pandemic, but I typically am home 2 to 3 days a week. I actually really like the interaction, the collaboration in office. Some of the other things that my company has been able to help with, and I sort of always go through a back door to kind of arrange. So I went to facilities for the lighting, but I went to security, and I got a little bit of help with parking outside of the building, and you'd be amazed how much better that made the day, particularly at the end of the day. And then the security group has also will also provide an escort to the car, even though it's on the property and it's not terribly far away. But when it's an extremely bad day and I'm really struggling to leave the office and probably need a little extra help there.
Great.
That's awesome. I mean, I definitely remember having a job when I worked at a corporate bank. It actually sometimes works a little better than just like lupus. It's like, this is actually, I just got out of something that's good. You got a parking space. I know for me, I was supposed to work inside of an office with my boss. And I was like, ooh, they put me right under the air conditioning. My Raynaud's is acting up. I can't be under the AC. And I was like, yes, I can get away from my boss. But definitely knowing that these reasonable accommodations are helpful. And Danielle, I'm curious, what about you? I saw you shaking your head. What about your work from home situation?
Yeah, with everyone else, I went home during COVID. And honestly, I would agree with Trish. I'm someone who likes the interaction and engagement with in-person activity. So that transition was really difficult for me. Even though I'd work, a couple days a week from home, but going full time really shifted things for me. And I was back in the office and about 3 days a week, and things were well. And then, I hit my next health crisis, which brought me out of the office again and working from home. And that's really more, because of the things that are going on with my Graves' disease and my lupus that, are preventing me from going in the office. But I've had a very supportive supervisor who has, been very flexible with me throughout all of this.
That's good. Praise God for a good boss and an understanding boss that wants to actually really make sure their employees are doing well. Well, before we add our HR specialist, Sanaa Walker, into the chat, Trisha, please tell us, you have to talk, you are the star, you're the patient advocacy star for the night, because you are on Capitol Hill and you are going to represent at the American College of Rheumatology event. How can someone join you and really advocate for lupus the way you have and on Capitol Hill and other places?
Yeah. So Medical Awareness Week is generally in the spring, and I'd urge everyone to reach out to the Lupus Research Alliance. They set up a great program, making sure just about all of the 48 of the 50 states are represented at this event. And it's an opportunity to go out somewhat scripted and explain why, medical research dollars need to be, earmarked for lupus. So I definitely say, reach out to the Lupus Research Alliance.
Thank you, Trisha. And even though I cannot make the conference this year, I'm going to be living through you and just enjoy all the networking and time with other people doing similar work.
Thank you.
Yes. All right. Well, we are going to add our HR professional to the chat, our HR consultant, Sanaa Walker, the founder and president of HR Girlfriends, a global networking organization. Welcome to the stage, Sanaa. Sanaa is also a credentialed career strategist. Make sure you check out thecareerhelpdesk.com. And here you are. Welcome to the virtual stage.
Hi, I'm always tickled when I hear my introduction. I'm like, is that me? Okay, yeah, I can handle that. I can handle that.
That's all
It's so good
you.
to be here. It's so good to be here with you.
Thank you. So now please let us know, what is the biggest challenge in the workforce today in the US and globally?
And it's so interesting. I had one perspective before I came on tonight's show, and then I hear the conversation it's hard to narrow it down, right? But I can tell you that even what I thought about prior to the show, as we talk about chronic illnesses, I thought my answer was DEI, right? Like to me, that's a really, really big issue because it really stems and reaches all parts of the employee experience, including health, right? How can one feel included if they don't have the space, the psychological safety to communicate that they have an illness worthy of being recognized, right? So, that was my answer, is that DEI is in a state of disarray. And between the performative things that companies are doing, putting up the black square because that shows that we're supporting Black Lives Matter, or putting up a post saying that, we honor, mental health month, or, breast cancer month, or whatever it is that these companies and organizations are putting their dollars in social media behind. It really comes down to, what are they actually doing, right? Like, what happens in the organization? I heard Trisha talk about what sounded like some ERG, some employee resource groups that she finds support in, right, to help her navigate her experience living with lupus. And so that's where you can tell what our company is doing, right? So when we talk about what the challenges are, that's how I see it. It stems from DEI, and then everything else sort of comes out from that.
Definitely. And I think that diversity also includes, a lot of times we think of some of the bigger signatories of diversity, like race or gender. But yeah, definitely ability, is a part of that, and making sure everyone has equal access to being able to do the thing that they need to do to live a full life. So, well, what are 3 common mistakes you think that employees can sometimes make at work while managing having a chronic illness?
So, tonight, Danielle and Trish have talked about not speaking up. Danielle has one experience where she's comfortable, and Trisha's had another experience. But I would say that the state of human resources and the progression of certain protections, both state and federal, I think have really lent themselves to being more communicative about where you are health-wise. I think it's advantageous. So I think first and foremost, finding space to speak up, and then but then let's start in the interview process. Why are we choosing the place that we choose to work if we can't show up in our illness and be supported in that? That is who we are. So when a company says we want a more diverse workforce, they are saying we want people with chronic illnesses. They are saying we want people who are neurodiverse. That's what they're saying. That's diversity, right? And so they've got to show you better than they can tell you. And what does that look like when you're interviewing in an organization? So I say some of those errors are not getting enough information about the culture of an organization and what they really stand for. And then have them demonstrate that through scenarios. The way they ask employees, tell me about a time in which you did, tell me about a time in which you supported an employee who had a chronic illness. So I think we've got to do better as job seekers in encouraging them to ask better questions in the interview process. Also, find the space to speak up. And 2, know the law. While I would gather that Danielle and Trisha learned about ADA and FMLA through their own experiences, I think right on the onset, Trisha talked about learning in her last year of college that she had lupus. I mean, the moment you find out, especially at that age, I would hope that there's some resources where people are teaching you about ADA, and not just how to define it and what website to go to. What does it look like practically, right? What if you run into someone in HR who isn't as informed? It happens, right? It happens, especially if you work at a company under 50 employees. Maybe the HR person isn't as seasoned. They may know, but they may not know. So it helps to be informed as somebody with a chronic illness. So you've got to know your rights, and you have to know how it applies to you.
So now, I was going to ask you to clarify for our viewers, what does ADA mean, in a workspace, and what does FMLA mean?
Absolutely. So Americans with Disability Act, that's ADA, that's leading on what we call reasonable accommodations. Typically, when you start with an employer in the US, you're starting not being qualified for FMLA, which is the more federal robust covering of someone who has a medical illness. Typically, when you start with a company, because FMLA usually requires 1 year of service, 1,250 hours of work. Well, you don't start with that qualifier. You've got to be at the job for a year. And so in order to meet that, there's a stopgap, and that stopgap is ADA. But interestingly enough, ADA is present for your entire employment, even when when you're eligible for FMLA. And what ADA says is, with or without this accommodation that you are asking for, you can do the job you signed up for. But we're willing to look at this request you've made of us to help you do your job better. And we have to determine if it's cost prohibitive, right? So you asking a small plumbing company with 100 employers for 6 months off or 3 months off, even if it's intermittent, looks a lot different than you asking ExxonMobil, right? And so companies by law have the ability and the right to determine if your request is cost prohibitive. And if it is, it's this interactive process they're required to have with you. And the reason that interactive process is required under ADA reasonable accommodations is because you may be asking for one thing, but we may be able to meet you in the middle, right? And so that's why we're having a dialogue. So this is not a one-way street. I can't just close the door on you if your request doesn't meet the mark. I am required by law to have an engagement with you about how can I help you, right? And so that's really what it boils down to. And then for FMLA, once you qualify, that's really a lot, that's another level to it. But, there are a lot of laws. That's really what I'm trying to say is you are covered, but only if you know.
Mm-hmm.
And family medical leave, can you speak to what that is? And that was such a comprehensive version of ADA, but family medical leave.
And so FMLA is a law that is federal, but also there are states that have created their own version of FMLA. And so you have to know, am I living and working in a state that is adhering to federal FMLA, which has one requirement, or am I in a state like I used to start my career in Washington, D.C., not a state, but in D.C., they had their own FMLA. And that version of FMLA was more generous than federal. So I always adhered to DC's. I never looked at the federal FMLA. Well, I knew that as an HR practitioner. My employees didn't know that. And what FMLA says at the federal level, if your state and your company is adhering to that, is you get 26 weeks of 12 weeks of, well, if it's military, you get a little bit more, but you get 12 weeks of leave, intermittent or continuous, to take care of your health. You also get that same amount of time to take care of someone else. So if you are a caregiver, right, this is about the people in your lives that are helping you. So you're helping educate them about their job, right? Because if you have a caregiver, an adult son, a spouse, a sister, they too have protections under the law. But we have to see, do they qualify with their employer? But it's a big bucket to understand and way too much for me to give you in one 15-minute session. But just know that with FMLA, as long as you've worked a minimum of a year, 1,250 hours, which usually full-time workers get that, you are covered to take time off to take care of yourself.
Thank you. And as an HR professional, I do have to say this, there's this love and hate with your division, because sometimes when we get in trouble, you're in charge of that. And sometimes when we need help, you're in charge of that. So should people really trust? I think this was actually a viewer question. Should we trust in HR? Can we trust them? And what are the protections around the things that are shared there?
Yeah. I always tell individuals that come to my office. Right now I'm a consultant. And so as a consultant, I have employees across various industries, various clients, and I tell them all the same thing, that my profession requires that I live in black and white. When I can live in the gray, I'm there with you. But I'm usually mandated by a state law, a federal law, when I'm trying to guide you around your rights and what you have available to you. But can you trust us? You should be able to. And if you have HR where you can't trust them, I'm asking why. Do they have a practice of not being consistent, right? Or do you not just agree with what we have to say? Because sometimes I don't agree with it either, but I have to adhere to it, right? I want to be more generous with you as an employee, but my hands are tied. Because the one thing they stress in HR across the board is consistency. I cannot do for you what I will not be able to do for others. And so the precedent matters so huge. So I know as a sufferer of lupus or any other chronic disease, that's not something you want to hear, but we have to have a baseline, and that's our baseline. If I give you accommodations for your lupus, I have to do it for someone inevitably who qualifies for ADHD and for a car accident and for other things that may occur along the way. And so I hope that you can trust HR, and that's the work I do with HR Girlfriends, is ensuring that the women that are members of my organization understand through the education programs we provide what their resources are, how to become better educated on the compliance laws so that they are better practitioners. That's my job, and we do that every day under our umbrella with the members that we take in across the country and really globally.
No, thank you. And I see we had another viewer, Janine. I definitely understand that sometimes our past experiences with HR make us a little hesitant to try to test this out and see what we can say. But glad to know that that Janine benefited from FMLA, in the past. So thank you. And let's bring Danielle and Trisha back in. Just thinking about everything that has been said so far. What does anything stand out to you as things that were really helpful for you? How did you find out? What were resources you used to find out any of this? Was it just HR telling you, or anything? Like, how did you both find out about that? Danielle, I'm just going to throw it to you real quick.
Well, a lot of programs I had awareness of because my undergraduate and master's degree is in HR. And so I had, from an educational standpoint, I had knowledge of programs available or that should be available from employers. And so once I started working and was diagnosed and joined the federal government, I had to look into the resources available through federal employers so that I could understand what would be available to me.
Thank you. And what about you, Trisha?
And for me, I really was somebody who stood back, watched, and listened. We had some folks who, had some health issues, and exactly, what was a reasonable accommodation for their particular conditions in these large, offices where we were, at the time, 5 days in the office. So it was really interesting. So that sort of empowered me when things came up, particularly the lighting issue, to get that accommodation. But like I said, I've always gone to the source. I haven't gone the HR route. I've gone to facilities. I've gone to realty for the parking. So I've never really had a true conversation with someone in HR about what my needs were. These other folks are trained around the company to assist one another, and it's very collegial. I would say where I work for that.
My HR spidey sense is like, oh no, because I'm thinking, Trisha. Yeah. A part of me says, well, what are you leaving on the table, right? What benefits? I have to tell you this: nothing you ever are told in open enrollment or at the annual open enrollment ever sticks. I don't care how smart you are. I've hired really educated professionals. Their job is not to remember every single benefit. I don't even go into the laws of it all. So I really encourage you to have a conversation with HR, even if it's exploratory, right? Just so that you understand there may be benefits tied to other benefits, right? And we as HR professionals have so many benefit options now, and we are chased down the street to bring these benefits in through these benefit providers, and they're helpful for employees, but there's no way to tell them all to you. So I just encourage anyone listening not to leave anything on the table. Have a conversation with HR as your life changes, as things happen to you, so that you better understand. As you get married and you add someone onto your health coverage, well, what does that mean? How does that change my benefit options? Do I get more? Do I get less? Are we splitting things? I think a lot of employees are just so busy, and it makes sense, just doing the work that they were hired to do, that there's less self-care focus on how to get everything that's due to them.
So now tell us and our viewers how early you can have these conversations, because I think people are also concerned about how does that affect the hiring process, and can I ask these questions during interviews?
Well, I think it's all in what you say and how you say it. I think if I'm vetting a company in the interview process, I'm going to come across and I'm going to say, it's really important to me that I work for an organization that exhibits certain characteristics in their culture. Some of the things that I've noticed in past employment are how employers treat able-bodied versus disabled, chronic illnesses. Can you give me some examples of instances, obviously no name, where the company has showed up, whether it's mandated or not, to support an employee under those circumstances? I mean, right? So
taking yourself out of the equation, essentially.
Absolutely. And so, look, that's the career coach in me, helping people frame the question, but you need to ask it. You really do. If you think about the things you ask a company or that you asked your current employer before you got on board, I bet you'd probably go, oh my goodness, if I could do a do-over, right? Like who your boss is going to be is important, right? When's lunch is important, but there are so many more important things to talk about. And guess what? This is your process. Our lives change dramatically when we pick an employer. They're not just interviewing you, you're interviewing them. Maybe they're not the right choice.
And that's usually the hardest thing, is like that part where they're like, do you have any questions? And I'm like pulling things out of my wherever, because I did my research and I truly don't have that many, but that's a really great question. I mean, and Trisha, you've been at your company for 25 years. They sounds like they've done something right though. Like at least you've been able to have quite a bit of support there.
I believe so. We've hit some bumps along the way. I get a monthly infusion, and that's been really tough because I had to take a full vacation day to do that. We don't have intermittent disability, time off. So with the pandemic, it got me into having home infusion. So we're all happy. I'm getting the medicine I need, and I'm doing it at a time that I'm not losing vacation time. And they're coming, at the 4:30 hour to do that. So yeah, I think they're more about solutioning the problem rather than maybe offering a new solution to it. Yeah.
No, that's awesome. And this information was definitely really helpful. There's definitely another question I want to say that might be really good around this, because I know that for me, I definitely struggled, and I think that there was a big conversation around picking a career, and it sounds like we have so many good conversations that can come off of this around even more ways for us to think about careers and thinking about our jobs and thinking about where we want to be in the future. So
that's true, Chanel.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, Chanel. As we think about this community planning careers, what factors, and everyone can jump in, do you think a person living with lupus should consider?
Yeah, I mean, from an HR perspective, and as someone who coaches individuals who have and don't have chronic illnesses, I think one of the things that I would say is obviously you have to be mindful of your capacity, right? You have to be mindful of your capacity. And I never want to give a response that takes away from the fact that everyone doesn't live in an urban epicenter, right? Some people in rural America where jobs are not as plentiful. And so I want to honor that that's, the case for some people, and choice isn't as bountiful. But what I would say is, I always tell people, sometimes for what you do on the clock, you may have to make up for it off the clock. And how do you do that? What does self-care look like? And keeping your health appointments and making sure that you give yourself options and resources. I think, I was diagnosed myself with ADHD when I was 40, and my world opened up, but I also was diagnosed in the middle of the pandemic. And so I had to figure out life. And I did that through groups online, programs.
And you've shared it. Shared it, which has been amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But it's helpful to share. I really think so. It's freeing. I've gotten so many resources from saying what I need or that I have this thing.
And I think it's helpful. I'm so sorry. We're definitely running out of time, but I think thank you so much, for sharing this idea of being able to, really think about resources and what the resources are and how our health is tied to our work. So thank you, Sanaa, and thank you, Danielle and Trisha. Everyone shared so much great information tonight.
We can't close our show without thanking Biogen for allowing us to be here tonight. If anyone is interested in getting more information about lupus or just information about clinical trials in general, please go to www.biogentriallink.com, as you see at the bottom of the screen. And please join us on our next episode, Tuesday, October 24th, same time, live. We will honor phenomenal lupus warriors, including the founder of the Real Housewives of Lupus support group. And as always, we would love to close with Chanel's spoken word.
Productivity is all my limbs understand sometimes. They don't always remember the words stop or time off. I treat the fumes I run on as if they were clouds of smoke dusted off of my heels as I sprint forward full speed. Then my body forces me to realize that a break can prevent me from shattering, that there are legal protections to ensure my safety, that the day my arms and legs can't move like they used to, the same place I work myself to the bone will find another body to replace me. So I have to balance. I will make peace a priority. My work may be what I love to do, but it doesn't define my worth, and my real job is living my life to the full. Thank you so much, you all. See you all next week, 2 weeks from now. Join me live at Harlem.